A sentence printed on a formula tin is supposed to protect babies and keep them safe. But in a new study, formula feeding mothers said that it made them feel inadequate, they doubted themselves, and in the researchers' own words, they felt shamed. This label exists for a very important public health reason. It's to protect breastfeeding from heavy, aggressive, commercialised marketing. If you don't know what I mean by that, look at one of my last videos on the history of breastfeeding. You'll find out all about what happened with the Nestle scandal. So how can we keep that protection in place without making new mums feel like they're doing something wrong by feeding them their baby formula? Now let's look at the study, what it found and what it didn't find. Welcome back, my name is Joanna, I'm a mum to two and I'm making short videos basically summing up academic papers and data, these sorts of things, on parenting topics like pregnancy, education, the school system. I used to be I'm an ex-teacher, so it's interesting to me. Breastfeeding, behaviour, language acquisition, literally anything that a parent might be interested in, to try and help us make informed decisions so that ultimately we can become better parents together. That's the goal. If you like that idea, please do hit like and subscribe. Now this paper is called The Label of Shame, How Formula Feeding Mothers in Israel Perceive the Warning Labels on Infant Formula Packaging. It was published this year in June 2026 as well. Now, the research itself. So, researchers carried out in-depth, semi-structured interviews with 31 educated middle-class Jewish mothers in Israel who mainly or exclusively formula fed. They were asking these women how they understood the message on a formula tin that basically says that breastfeeding or breast milk is the optimal source of milk for a baby. They asked how they understood that, and they also asked what it did to their sense of self as mothers. Now, the authors themselves use an idea of institutionalised motherhood. Basically, society creates a narrow sense of what a good mother is, and then it judges women according to that standard. So for these participants, the label could feel like a tiny official verdict attached to every feed. Every time they see that label, it makes them feel a judgment. So there are 4 themes that came out of these interviews. First, participants felt that this label made formula appear harmful to babies, but what it actually is that it's a regulated alternative when breast milk isn't available. It's generally safe if you follow the instructions on the tin, and it is very, very necessary for babies. It helps babies to thrive and grow, but it just isn't as optimal as breast milk. But that doesn't mean that it's harmful. Second, it triggered feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt. Thirdly, they felt that it raised the reasons why families use formula feeding. For instance, feeding difficulties, latch issues, health issues, mental health, work, previous trauma, low supply, or simply they just made an informed choice that they wanted a formula feed. And fourth, it placed feeding methods into a perceived moral hierarchy where breast milk was good and is what a good mother should be doing, and formula is something that you need to justify with an explanation of, like, my mental health was bad, or I had low supply, that's why I couldn't, and those explanations aren't necessary. Now this fits the wider literature as well. I really do recommend reading this study. The introduction and the wider literature review that it does is really interesting and really helpful, especially for me as someone that breastfed, to really try and understand how formula feeding mothers feel. It really helped me. In an online study of 890 mothers that use some formula, 67% of these mothers reported feeling guilt, 68 felt stigma, and 76 felt like they had to defend their decision. I know that in my comments I get a lot of mums that are defending their decision to use formula, and I want to make it clear, you don't need to do that on my channel. There's no judgment. You're all welcome, whatever you choose to do. You don't need to explain yourself. Now these are really big figures, but what we do need to know is that these mothers were recruited from international social media sites, so they shouldn't be treated as population level statistics. A systematic review that found shame and guilt across feeding experiences, while noting that shame had been barely measured quantitatively. A UK review of the Baby Friendly Initiative found some improvement in early breastfeeding, but also an unrealistic expectation and negative emotional experiences linked to that when care was not adapted to the individual. Now, the paper itself isn't telling us that warning labels do make mothers feel ashamed in general. The 31 interviews that were taking place were really rich in detail. However, they were not a population estimate. The sample that was selected was socially narrow, and all of the volunteers had volunteered themselves, and they had really strong experiences to share. There was also no comparison label or before or after measure. The interviews don't isolate the label from difficult feeding experiences to comments and judgments from people and expectations that the women had themselves. I know a lot of these sorts of thoughts and feelings can be internalized. There's a lot of judgment from others, and it's pretty hard to split all of those factors up. But its real strength is making an overlooked experience visible and generating a policy question that can now be tested. Could alternative wording still protect breastfeeding while giving safe information without implying that formula feeding makes someone a lesser mother? And this is where balance matters, because the World Health Organization and UNICEF recommend exclusive breastfeeding for at least 6 months, followed by complementary foods and breastfeeding up until about 2 years or beyond, whenever you want to stop, really. Breastfeeding has real population health benefits, and commercial formula marketing has a real long history undermining it. If you look at the Nestle scandal and all of these sorts of things, that basically led to death of babies because formula was being pitched and marketed and aggressively sold to people, to vulnerable mothers who couldn't continue because they didn't have a safe water supply, which led to the death of lots of babies. So we have to be able to balance this history, where formula is now, and make sure that we've got guidelines and regulations to protect babies and to protect mothers so that it's not aggressively sold where people can't sustain formula. And we also do have to promote breastfeeding as well. So how do we balance all of these things together? And that is why we have the World Health Organization marketing code that says that breast milk substitutes should be available when needed, but it shouldn't be promoted. So the public health problem is real. But protection from marketing and support for an individual parent is not the same conversation. Be nice now so that formula should be discussed sensitively and without judgment. It also says that parents who formula feed should receive one-on-one face-to-face support on safe and responsive bottle feeding. And the NHS is clear that all infant feeding sold in the UK must meet the same legal standards and is suitable for growth and development. So, what is our parenting takeaway? This is the bit that I think really matters. So the takeaway is not that breastfeeding doesn't matter and that we should or could ignore public health guidance. It is that a population recommendation is not a moral score for a family. Breastfeeding deserves better practical support, paid leave, paternity leave, skilled help, lactation consultants, and it does need protection from commercial pressure. But formula feeding families also deserve accurate safety information and respect. So if you're deciding how to feed, you need to consider your whole family, your baby's growth, your body, your mental health, work support, and also your own individual preferences. Combination feeding is also a real feeding method as well. It's not a failure between two ideals. If you are using formula, you need to follow the preparation guidance on the tin for the country that you live in. Ask your health visitor or your midwife for extra support if you need any. But please do not read a population level message as a diagnosis of the level of love that you have for your child, your competence or your bond for your baby. Feeding is care, shame is not a nutrient. If you found this video helpful, please do hit like and subscribe. I'd really recommend you read this study. It's quite interesting and it helped me understand formula feeding mums. And if you engage with this video, it will be pushed to parents that need to hear these sorts of messages and videos as well. So please do that. I'd also like to hear your experience about this as well. Did the information that you received when you had your baby made you feel supported, and was it practical, or did it feel like a judgment? Let me know in the comments. And on that note, I'll see you for another video. See you later.